In the movie, a magical thing happens in her life, and she gets this power through her hair, and the whole story is an adventure that she's trying to go find these magical lights because she's was kidnapped by an evil witch that she had no idea wasn't her mother from the time she was a baby, who was just using her. Anybody ever be in a situation where people are using you? That's not what we're talking about today. But that's where she was. She meets this man who she hits on the head with a frying pan. Anybody ever done that? Let's not dig deep there today, since it is Father's Day. And they go on this adventure. And through this story, she finds out that this woman is not her mother, that she's using her, that she's been kidnapped. And so the rest of the time they're trying to escape. And through all of it, near the end of the movie, while trying to save her, this man, Flynn Rider, gets stabbed and killed. Or stabbed, almost killed. And she tries to heal him because that's what happens. She has this hair that magically heals. And she tries to heal him, but instead of her healing him and being imprisoned to the witch for the rest of her life, he cuts her hair, sacrifices himself so that she could be free, and dies. I put that in quotations. Because through the story, she cries and magical tears bring him back to life. Now, it's a beautiful story. It's a wonderful thing. It's a good ending. But I think it's really fitting today because we're finishing our series in signs, talking about the signs of Jesus. Now, man, I'm going to be honest with you. This is not a Father's Day message, all right? We're in series. We go through series. We'll throw some things in there for you. We celebrate you, all right? But I believe if we can open God's Word and we can learn and grow closer to Him, we're going to be the fathers we need to be. So we will talk about that some. But I think this statement is very fitting because it could be a description of each of the four Gospels. Each Gospel tells a story of how Jesus died. But fortunately, like the story that we just talked about, it doesn't end there. In fact, it's not older now. I saw a meme the other day that talked about how, I don't remember exactly what the meme was, but it just made me feel old. It was like how far 1920 is from 30, and like how old we are from like the time I was born. I don't remember what it was. I just felt old. I read it, I'm like, seriously? But there's a song that says this was the end. It was a guy sitting on a plane, and he's telling the story of the gospel, and he's talking about it, and it gets up to the point where Jesus dies, and he says, and that was the end of the beginning. So like Tangled, the story doesn't end there. The Gospels also tell a story of how Jesus rose from the dead, and that's the final sign that we're going to look at in this series. I don't think there could be a more fitting sign. So far in the signs, we've looked at all of them show how God is at work through Jesus in the world. And they're pointing out God's overwhelming grace and love through Jesus. That's what we see in everything that He's done. But today's sign shows us something a little deeper. It shows us God's power. And after His crucifixion, I'm going to be honest with you, this message could be an Easter message. But then again, couldn't so many of them. Because we're going to be talking about the resurrection of Jesus. After His crucifixion, Jesus was buried in a tomb, and on the third day, some of His disciples went to the tomb, and guess what? The stone was rolled away. Now, I hope I didn't ruin the plot to the Bible for you. If you haven't read that far yet, it's going to be a good day. At this point in the story, though, the disciples don't really understand what happened. So what we're going to do is we're going to open up God's Word. We're going to go to John chapter 20. It'll also probably be on the screen. I'm going to have Logan follow along with me. But before we do, throw up this first picture. Throw up that first picture that was up there. I understand that when we have the microphone, we have the power. I'm going to try to be conscious today to get you at a decent time, okay? I know it is Father's Day. I know some of you may be grilling. Some of you may be having plans, so we will do our best. I want to give God His time, but I also want to let you have time with your family and not hold you hostage. So, that being said, John chapter 20, starting with verse 1, says, on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb early while it was still dark. She saw that the stone had been removed from the tomb. She ran to Simon and Peter and to the other disciple, the one that Jesus loved, and said to them, they have taken the Lord out of the tomb. We don't know where they've put Him. Mary is the first one at the tomb. We also see, I see this as very interesting, and I'm going to throw this out later, but I want to point this out at the very beginning. Because if you're here, I don't know where your situation is. I don't know how long you've been going to church. I don't know where you stand when it comes to the Bible, to Jesus, to God. But I know this. Mary was the first one at the tomb. She was also the first one to see a risen Savior. And Mary was also the one who lived years with 7 demons inside of her that Jesus healed and brought out. Can you imagine that on your resume? Oh, you were a follower of Jesus. Tell me a little bit about your background. Who's ever had to do a resume and kind of tell your life story? Yeah. Could you imagine putting that on there? Well, there was this one time, right? So as that is a mark on her history, what a testimony. But it also shows you why she has such love and devotion for Jesus. Because I lived with these demons inside of me, and he healed me. He took them out of me. He loved me through it. And here's what I want you to see from that. Mary's troubled past did not disqualify her from being the first one to see the resurrected Jesus. And that's much more important than we even understand when it comes to the biblical time. Also, his first commissioned messenger of the resurrection and the gospel. When it happened. We'll talk about that in a minute. Here's what she says. She goes there. What had happened was Joseph of Arimathea had gotten this tomb. He donated this tomb. They had buried Jesus. They had done the best they could to preserve the body. I did find out that there was like 100 pounds of stuff that went on a dead body at this time, spices and things like that would weigh it down even more. That would almost mummify the body. That would make it hard. That would create this, just think about how much time that would take. So even though it was late at night when they had buried Jesus, they probably did not have time to go through all this. So the women decided we're going to go when we were allowed to go, and we're going to finish this. So Mary goes to the tomb. She sees an empty tomb. Now here's what I think is interesting. How many times did Jesus talk about his resurrection in the Bible? Anybody know? I don't either. There's a lot. He mentioned it a lot. Does that make you feel better when a pastor says, I don't know? Because you're like, I should really know that. Oh, I don't have to know it. Okay, good. It's okay. We're all learning together, right? Many times. But her first reaction when Jesus is not there is somebody stole his body. Somebody took his body. And that's the message that she sees and takes to John and Peter. So she goes in verse 3, it says, she runs and tells Simon and Peter, they've taken the Lord out of the tomb and we don't know where they've put him. And at that point, Peter and the other disciple went out heading to the tomb. The two were running together, but the other disciple outran Peter and got to the tomb first. I'm going to stop for just a minute. If you don't know this, the other disciple, the one Jesus loved, do you know who that was? It was John. He was writing the book. So very interesting. John is humble enough not to name himself, but proud enough to let you know that he outran the old man. You see that? Because there probably was an age difference between Peter and John. Maybe 10, maybe even 20 years. There was an age difference there. And so he's humbly bragging. You've heard that humble brag. That the disciple that Jesus loved outran the old guy and got to the tomb first. I think that was, I find humor in that because that's my sarcasm. That's what I would say if I was in that situation. And in John chapter 4 through 8, we see these things happen. The two of them were running together. The other one outran Peter and got to the tomb. Stooping down, he saw the linen cloth lying there, yet he didn't go in. Something stopped him from going in. Then following him, Simon Peter came also. He entered the tomb and saw the linen clothes lying there. The wrapping that had been over his head was not lying with the linen cloths, but was folded up in a separate place by itself. The other disciple who had reached the tomb first, he says it again, by the way. The other disciple, who again was the first one there, entered the tomb and saw and believed. So when John runs to the tomb, he looks inside, he examines it. The word that's used here is to clearly see a material object. He looks, he sees what's happening, he stoops down, he looks in. I'm not going to go into the specifics of the grave, but this was a big, family grave. It was big. He looked in and he saw something that seemed out of place. He sees the grave wrappings of Jesus. Now I want you to understand something for a minute. What would it take to put all of the spices, all of that on his body? It would harden the cloth around him. So this was a body shaped, like this would have been shaped almost in his body. And it had not been disturbed, but there was no body there. So you can see why when John gets to the tomb, he's looking in, he's like, something's out of place here. Something is different. And he stops. Because John was the kind of person that thought before he acted. We're going to see that Peter's not, right? Something kept John from actually going in the tomb. Having seen the grave clothes still there, he might have thought that the body was still in there somewhere and refrained from entering. Maybe he felt like out of respect for the dead, or there was a thing back then that you didn't want to be defiled by a dead body. But either way, he looks around. Peter, he comes barging through. Peter, old man, huffing, puffing. His face is all red. He gets to the tomb. Anybody can relate to that? Quick story. When we were looking at houses, you know, first of all, I live in a house that's a very high hill, so just to get up my steps, it's pretty rough. But we were looking at this one place, and I was with my realtor. I was with my wife, and we were walking. I'm going to throw my wife under the bus here. I was walking through, and we went up this giant hill, and I got to the top, and I'm like, this is a nice house. And I look over, and both of them are like, breathing heavy. Like, this is a lot. This is a big hill. And I'm like, that's why I do steps, because it helps. Anyways, just to throw in there for a little cardio. Get your cardio. It's important. So anyways, Peter's there. He's huffing. He's puffing. He's red. But he barrels through. Whatever kept John from going in didn't stop Peter. When he finally arrives, he immediately goes in the tomb, because this is Peter. He's action-oriented. He's impulsive. That's what he does. John stopped and thought about it. Peter just goes right in. So going in, Peter sees the clothes. They're still laying there. It's as if the body is there, but there's no body. Nothing had touched it. It's almost as if the body had evaporated. Evaporated. I'm having struggles today talking. Music. I had a hard time saying music earlier. Evaporated from these cloths. And the wrappings were not even disturbed. Peter saw it and he said, this isn't normal. And the whole point of the description is that the grave clothes didn't look as if they had been put off, taken off. They were just lying there like regular folds. And Jesus had evaporated out of them, and the headpiece was folded and laid nicely. So after Peter goes in the tomb, he sees this. He's not quite understanding what's happening. It says that John looked in and saw. Now it's interesting because there's three definitions of saw when it comes to this passage. The first one was when they looked in. It was just to look. John saw, he looked in. Then Peter looked in, carefully examined. And then the third version is John goes, he stoops in, he saw it, is to understand and receive their significance here. And I find it very interesting because John then steps in, he looks at what has happened, and he believes. Now, why that's interesting is because all of the other disciples, all of the other early Christians did not believe in the resurrection because the tomb was empty. They believed after they saw the resurrected Jesus. John was the only one to look at the empty tomb, look at the situation, and say, he's risen. Now, he didn't quite understand yet exactly the meaning of all of this, but it says that he believed. Simply by seeing the tomb and no body, he believed in the resurrected Jesus. John was the first human being to understand Jesus Christ is risen. So we read in John chapter 20, verse 9. For they still did not understand the scriptures that he must rise from the dead, and then the disciples went home. I want to stop for a minute. Because John believed. That's important. There's importance in this, okay? I want you to understand. There's importance in the fact that John believed but didn't understand. Because they did not understand how it connected to Scripture yet. John understood the fact that the resurrection, he understood the fact of the resurrection before he understood the meaning of the resurrection. There's two ideas here. The fact of the resurrection. I'm going to talk about the fact of the resurrection and the meaning of the resurrection. As a pastor and as a Christian, I want you, everybody in here, and the people I meet to be persuaded of the fact of the resurrection. What that means is this. The resurrection of Jesus is a proven fact, whether you believe it or not. Right? If you don't believe it, you might say no. But it's a proven fact, whether I believe it or not. It's not, I believe he rose, so he did, or I don't believe he rose, so maybe he didn't. It happened. It's an event in history, whether I believe it or not. It's the fact of the resurrection. Then the question is, well, what does it mean? Because that's where it gets personal with you. Knowing the fact of the resurrection is an important start, but it's not enough. We have to let the Bible tell us the meaning and the importance of the resurrection, okay? So what does the resurrection mean? I've got these up on the screen as well. The resurrection means a few things. Here's the first thing. Jesus is who he said he was. He is God. It proves that everything he said about himself is true. Romans 1:4 says that Jesus was declared to be the Son of God with power according to the scriptures of holiness by the resurrection from the dead. It believes that the resurrection proves that Jesus is who he said he was. He was God. Okay? The second thing, it proves that his people can be sure of their resurrection. This is very important. The resurrection of Jesus means that we have assurance of our own resurrection. Because if we believe that Jesus died and rose again, 1 Thessalonians says, even so God will bring with him those who sleep in Jesus. It assures us that if he has the power over death and sin, then if we are in him, so do we. And I want to point this out because I think this is a beautiful thing today on Father's Day. Because maybe we talk about this a lot with mothers. Maybe Father's Day isn't all joyful for you. Maybe some of you didn't have a wonderful father. Maybe some of you lost a father. In 1985, at 5 years old, I lost my father to cancer. I lost I call him my adopted father, my stepdad, of 32 years in 2018. But what I know is that both of them believed in Jesus and the resurrection. And because of that, I'm going to see him again. See, the fact of the resurrection is important, but the meaning is significant to you personally. The resurrection also means that God has an eternal plan for the. I'm gonna hit like some amens here, I feel like. It means that God has an eternal plan for these bodies of ours. He has a plan of redemption that extends past just the spirit and the soul to the body. In other words, we're going to have resurrected bodies someday. So whoever struggles with pain, who wakes up in the morning every day and you ache, people who deal with eye problems, people who deal with sicknesses, I don't know what that looks like, to be honest with you. But somehow we will be connected to these physical bodies that we have now, and it's going to be new, and it's going to be improved. It reminds me of the thing that says, lean on him for your strength, and he will mount you up with wings like eagles. You will run and not be weary. Because we'll be in him. We'll be new. I'm excited for the day that I don't have to worry about those calories anymore. That I don't have to worry about, I like going to the gym, but I don't have to worry about getting to the gym. I don't have to worry about the pain I woke up with because I went to the gym. Or that time that we did yard work and you're like, why am I hurting everywhere? I just did yard work. Someday it will be new. Now I know that right now that's the selfish, that's the temporal, that's the personal me thinking that. The beautiful part of that is we will live with him forever and our bodies won't matter because he will. That's all that's going to matter. The resurrection also means that God demonstrated his power in an ultimate sense. Listen to this. The cross of Jesus is the ultimate demonstration of the love of God. I think we would agree with that. If you are a believer today, you believe that. The cross of Jesus is the ultimate image and demonstration of the love of God. But the greatest demonstration of the power of God is his resurrection. Aren't you glad that the God who loves you so much has the power to do good things and great things in your life? Because if you had a God who loved you so much but didn't have power in your life, it wouldn't matter. Right? And I have a slide for this one too, but it says the payment Jesus offered on the cross, this is the last one, it proves that the payment that Jesus offered on the cross was accepted by the Father. When Jesus cried out his last words on the cross, tetelestai, paid in full, it is finished. The death of Jesus on the cross was the payment, but the resurrection was the receipt. Showing that the payment was perfect in the sight of God the Father. So there's a lot of meaning in the resurrection. Talk about signs for us. So Peter goes in. John goes in. John believes, doesn't really say anything. And then they run away, and guess what happens? They leave poor Mary there just weeping. This is a sad picture. Men, this is how we are sometimes, right? We're going off doing our own thing now. Like, we're trying to figure things out. We got to fix we got to figure out what happened. And Mary is just there weeping and crying. And she doesn't know what to do. Verses 11 through 13 says, "But Mary stood outside facing the tomb crying, and as she was crying, she stooped to look in the tomb." So Mary stood outside the tomb weeping. Peter and John had examined the evidence. John was persuaded, though they didn't quite know the meaning. Mary didn't yet have confidence that Jesus was resurrected, so she's just crying because she loves Jesus so much. I want you to understand something. She doesn't know what's happening. All she knows is, I want Jesus. Like, do you see the devotion in her? The love in her? We're going to see it even more in just a minute. So she's just weeping. And then it says, she saw two angels in white sitting there, one at the head and one at the feet, where Jesus' body had been lying. And they said to her, "Woman, why are you crying?" She responds, "Because they've taken away my Lord," she told them, "and I don't know where they've put him." So as she's weeping, she stoops down. She looks in the tomb. She wants to see what Peter and John saw so she can make her own decision, her own examination. And yet, from the moment that Peter and John left, that she's weeping, that she goes in the tomb, all of a sudden something's different. There's two angels in there. It does. Now, do you think if there were two angels in there when Peter and John were in there, they would have mentioned that? These are just for her. But what I love is this. Now, if you're Mary and you walk into this tomb and there are angels in there, how do you respond? Well, everywhere else in the Bible, whenever you see it, it says what? They were afraid. They were terrified. She just talks to them because they don't matter to her. One thing matters to her at this point. She's so focused on seeking after Jesus that the angels can't satisfy her. Take that in for a minute. She's so focused on seeking after Jesus that even the angels can't satisfy her. They don't mean anything to her because she just wants Jesus. So in our series today, I find this fascinating because our whole thing is about signs, right? The sign. You know why Jesus always would say, these are the signs? Because people are seeking after signs and wonders and miracles. And he's saying, I'm the signs. I'm what you should be seeking after. So as Jesus was on earth teaching people, thousands of people were flocking to him, and all they kept saying was, show us a miracle. Do a miracle. And when he finally stopped doing miracles and he started speaking truth, what happened? They left him. So much, in fact, that he looked at his own disciples and said, are you going to leave me too? So Mary here says, angels, I don't really care about you. It's not significant right now. I'm looking for Jesus. Do you know where he's at? I think we need more of this attitude in our churches today. I'm not there for signs. I'm not there for or because of the music. I'm not there because of what they can do for me. I'm there for Jesus. If our country and our churches were more like that today, there'd be some change happening. So in verses 14 through 15, it says, having said this, she turned around and saw Jesus. Some of the ancient commentators and people who study the Bible said that perhaps the angels were like motioning to turn around because she's like, I'm looking for Jesus. Do you know where they laid him? And perhaps they were like, yeah, there's somebody behind you. Take a look. Or maybe she heard a noise behind her. Either way, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there, though she didn't know it was Jesus. Stop there for just a minute. I find it interesting. Let me read one more because I think this. As she's talking to Jesus, it says, woman, Jesus said to her, why are you crying? Who are you looking for? Do you think Jesus is messing with her a little bit here, by the way? Who are you looking for? Supposing he was the gardener, she replied, sir, if you've removed him, tell me where you've put him. I think this is very funny. I will take him away. Now, I want you to think about that for a minute. Mary's idea is to pick up and carry this body with her. Now, I don't know much about Mary. It's possible she was a strong gal. I've seen some women do some amazing things. It doesn't say that in the Bible. But just the idea of, was she physically capable of carrying away the dead body? This is important. I'll tell you why. She didn't have a plan. Her plan was to find the body of Jesus, to weep over the body of Jesus, to have him with her. She isn't thinking through her plans carefully. So Jesus says to her, Mary, and Jesus, in one word, Spurgeon says, preached the perfect sermon in one word, just by saying her name. I heard somebody else say this. Jesus didn't reveal himself to Mary by telling her who he was, but by telling her who she was. He cried out, Mary, and all was explained. She heard the name and the tone of the voice, her beloved Messiah. Jesus himself said, my sheep hear my voice, and they know me. And instantly she called Rabboni. I think this is interesting. Because I think, and I'm going to get a little bit off topic, but not off topic, off scripture, but on point with where we are today. I think it's very possible. Do you think it's interesting that she was searching and seeking for Jesus and he was in her presence the whole time? Now, there's speculation as to why she didn't recognize him, but I think it's interesting because it brings out a point. Is it possible to be in the presence of Jesus and not know it? Is it possible to sit in your church pew week after week? We don't have pews. We have chairs that I never thought I would say this are less comfortable probably than pews. Sorry about that. And be in the presence of Jesus and not recognize him. To sit by people week after week that worship and to watch people worship and to say, they look so connected, I just don't get it. To hear a man stand up here and yell and scream and feel like he's saying something important, and to say, I feel like he's passionate about it, but I don't understand it. I can tell you, growing up in a Christian home, I did that. And it wasn't connecting with me at the time. And I find it interesting because maybe you're here today and you're seeking something. You're looking for something that needs change. Your life needs change. You're looking for something. You don't know what it is. You're looking to connect. I want it to be real. I want the presence of Jesus. And here's my challenge to you today. Be like Mary for a minute and call out to Jesus and say, Jesus, if you're out there, if you're real, God, if you're real, can you call my name like Mary's? Now, I can't promise what God's response is going to be, but I can promise you this. The word tells us Jesus came to seek and to save. He came to seek and to save that which was lost. So as we are walking around saying, I'm seeking after something, Jesus is seeking after you. Recognizing that you're in the presence of the God of the universe. The God who has the power over all creation, power over death, power over the grave. Wants you. So my idea, and I'm almost done here, but my idea today is this. Stop seeking and start listening. Stop doubting and start talking and start searching here. Because verse 17, we're going to finish this off. She finally finds him, and guess what she does? She grabs him. And there's been some confusion over this verse, and I love this, as we're going to see the gospel, the power of the gospel. He says, don't cling to me, Jesus told her, for I have not yet ascended to the Father. But go to my brothers and tell them that I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God. Now, there's been some confusion. In the King James, it actually says, don't touch me. And I can tell you, we waste so much time over stupid arguments of why he would have said that to her that don't matter. When in actuality, it's not even what he said. What he said was, stop holding on to me, right? If you look at it from the Greek. I'll tell you why. Stop doing that rather than doing it. Many people think that he was saying, don't touch me because I'll be in contact with defilement, which is way out of context with Jesus. But what he was doing, he was not protesting that she shouldn't touch him. He was admonishing her not to detain him, number one, because you're going to see me again. The disciples are going to see me again. Guess what, Mary? I'm resurrected. I'm going to be around. And beyond that, there's going to be a deeper relationship with us from this point on. But I also think there's a gospel message in this interaction. Mary, you can't just hold on to me and keep me to yourself. Go tell other people. Right? Because she loves him so much. Can you go back to that time that maybe you started a relationship with Jesus and you were so excited? And then it got real. And guess what? A relationship with Jesus is not a personal thing. I'm sorry if you feel that way. It goes beyond that. When you have a relationship with Jesus, it becomes your duty to go tell people about it. Right? Mary, stop clinging on to me. You've got a job to do. Go tell other people. So what I love is this. Jesus made a woman, by the way, this is why I said this was earlier, a woman who would not, her testimony would not even be recognized in the court of law because it didn't matter. So if you're like, well, this story was all made up, this was a terrible made-up story because no one would have believed it anyways. But Jesus made a woman, and by the way, women, I respect you, right? You are respected. Jesus was very respectful of women. That's what changed the world in that perspective. Made a woman the first witness of his resurrection. She also was the first messenger of the resurrection. So I want to point out a couple things, and then I'm going to be done. I told you it was not as long. Get you home. A couple things I want to point out. Whatever your past is, Jesus still loves you and wants to use you. Whatever your position is, Jesus cares about you and loves you and wants to use you. In fact, how often did he use the people who had the checkered past? He would use those who weren't wise. He would use the disciples who changed the world. They looked at him and said, man, these uneducated men, how would you like to be known as that? These uneducated men have been with Jesus. There's something different about them. So whatever your past is, Jesus loves you and still wants to use you. And I also love this. Look what else he says. He says, Mary, go tell my brothers. This is the first time he calls the disciples brothers. He called them servants. He called them disciples. He called them friends. He never called them brothers. Right? It's the first time. And he tells them that I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God. So despite the fact, now think about this, if you're Jesus and you've been betrayed by all these turkeys, all right? They left you, all but John, left you at the cross. Peter said he didn't even know you. What is your response if you're Jesus at this point? Hey, go tell the disciples, I gotta see him for a minute. I gotta talk to him about something. But that's not his action. Despite the fact that all the disciples except John abandoned him, he calls them brothers. Because here's what happens. Jesus wants to invite you into his family. It's not the old ancient gods of the Greeks where they lord it over you, where it's like, why is God, all he cares about is control. He just wants to control my life. You say that about your parents too, by the way, right? When you're younger. Jesus invites you into his family, and it doesn't matter what your past is. He doesn't care. He wants to invite you into his family today. So even though this is not a Father's Day message, it is. Because Jesus said, if you then, who are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father in heaven give good gifts to those who ask him? See, we have a Father who loved us so much that he gave us his Son. Showing the power, first of all, showing the love that he has for you, that he would give up his Son on the cross, one of the most cruel ways to die. But then showing you his power in the grave. That not even death can defeat him. As Father, I'm not always great at it, but I try to give my kids good things. I try to take care of them. We try to make their life easier than our life was. That's always our goal as parents, right? Not that our lives were bad, but we want to make it better. We want to give them whatever we think they need, whatever we can give them, even sometimes that they want. But I can't touch what God can do for you in your life. And some of you, the problem may be that you don't have that relationship. You're not in the family of God. And you don't even understand the life change that it brings. Obviously, eternity, but right now, right here. He says, I've come to give you life, and I've come to give you an abundant life. So I'm going to have you close your eyes. I'm going to let the band come forward. I just want to ask you a couple questions. Talk to a few people here for just a minute. Number one, where do you stand when it comes to Jesus? Maybe you've been seeking what all of this is about. Maybe you've been longing or looking for some kind of love and acceptance and you haven't been able to find it. And I can tell you the reason. Without even knowing your story, I can tell you the reason. It's because true love and acceptance is only given through Jesus. If you haven't received him, you haven't received true love and acceptance. I want to speak to maybe somebody that's sitting here that's been in church for a long time, because I can tell you my story. Week after week, singing the songs, reading the words, standing up in front of the church and talking, and not having that relationship with him. Maybe you've been sitting in church for a long time trying to find Jesus, trying to find the connection that other people have. Everybody else seems to be getting it. You can't. My challenge stays the same to you. It's okay to call out to God. It's okay to say, if you're there, call my name. Because you're seeking me. Because I believe that you want me. Because I've looked everywhere else and I can't find it. I've looked at the things that this world offer. Nothing can satisfy me. You're my last hope. You know, Jesus was a lot of people's last hope. And he was their only hope to a new life. Let's pray. God, I truly believe that there is a love that you have that is so deep that we can't even understand or comprehend or respond correctly. But like Mary, all we can do is try to seek after you. Try to love you more. And I think we lose sight sometimes of the privilege that we have being in the family of God. The calling that we have. That I come here on a Sunday morning, and this is not my God time, and then I go do my life, that this is my time to connect with other people, to grow, to meet new people, base camp, to learn, to go out and be your messenger. I pray that we can grasp just how deep the love that sent you to the cross, but how powerful the grave image is. And because of that, it says that we are brothers and sisters. We are in the family of God. We are messengers. We are called out. For anybody that sits here today that has not done that, I am begging on their behalf to call their name. Because I know the life change that happens when I can leave all of the stuff that this world gives behind. And I can say, I just need Jesus. Pray that connections can be made. As we sing this last song that says, I run to the Father. I'm tired of hiding. There's no need to wait. That if somebody is challenged, if somebody is moved, that if you call somebody's name, that they will come forward, that they will talk to somebody, that they won't wait. I remember the day, after years and years and years of waiting, years of trying to make it work, years of trying to play the part, and I heard the message, and I felt the calling. I still waited till after the message and went and found somebody. When they were calling, if you're ready, come forward, and I just couldn't do it. Don't let anybody wait today. Help us run to the Father, the one who loves us so deeply. We're going to sing this song. I ask if you would stand with us, just in a spirit of prayer.